Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. So I will, let's say, comment on this EU Commission package, and I would like to start by telling you something which is obvious, is that at the moment when the, let's say, call it the BRD number 1 was written, we hadn't any real-life case, and at that moment, in a number of countries, there was, in reality, no resolution authority throughout Europe, and we were under, let's say, a treatment of a crisis, which was the previous one, the one which is not accepted anymore under the BRD and SRMR. The thing is that we are discovering now, month after month, after the creation of these resolution authorities and this network, the banking union network of resolution authorities within the banking union, headed by the Single Resolution Board I'm pleased to represent today. We are discovering a lot of things, a lot of issues to be addressed. And the BRD, let me call it number 2, can be also a good way to address some of these questions in the future about implementing a framework which is really useful, practical, and well crafted for implementing the resolution purposes. So all in all, when we received in last November the proposal built by the European Commission services, well, we welcomed it because we found that in reality a number of elements were supposed to go on the right direction, and it was certainly a positive thing to stop discussions, supposing that the text is adopted without any change, about, for instance, this question of breach of MREL. So the stacking order, the question of the positioning of the different elements in the stacking order between buffers for supervisory reasons and the MREL, different elements composing the MREL layer, were considered as very positive from our point of view in the sense that they clarified once for all the treatment of breaches, for instance, to give you just an example. So we were generally supportive of this proposal, but as all of us know, it depends now on the negotiation between the Council, the Parliament, and the EU Commission services. We are not at the table of the negotiations. We are invited from time to time to express our views. And we did it in front of the Council working group and then in front of Parliament. We were invited by the Econ committee for presenting our views, and I will come back to these views today with you. The key 2 words for us are credibility of the framework and, if I may invent a new term, implementability. Credibility of the framework. Before the 7th of June, a number of comments were made about the uncredibility of the framework and the incapacity of any European resolution authority to implement a framework, and I think we've seen that in that case, in the Spanish case, I mean, it worked. So there is some sort of credibility in this framework, as demonstrated by this first case. We can discuss it longly, but at a minimum, we see here a beginning of this credibility proof in the BRD number 1. So if we can improve the framework under this new text on BRD number 2, good news, as it will certainly reinforce this credibility. But at the same time, we have this question of implementability. What can we do to be sure that, as Stefan said a few minutes ago, we don't kill the patient by imposing him remedies which are too strong compared to what he can withstand? And this is a difficult objective to achieve. And all along the proposal made by the Commission, there are technical features which can be seen as giving us sufficient flexibility or, on the contrary, too many constraints to achieve this goal. So if we are supportive, we obviously think that some improvements could be given to this text. And I would like to mention some of them to you today, not all of them, but some of them, in two chapters. The first one concerning the MREL determination itself, with 4 key elements and perhaps some considerations on some other proposals made by the EU Commission services in this draft directive. So about MREL in itself, there's a recital in the draft which is extremely important for us, because what we want to achieve is to avoid cliff effects between systemic institutions. We start from the idea that the notion of GSIBs is well known. It's defined by the FSB and then implemented under the ESRB assessment in the European context. But anyway, we have this family based on criteria, and we draw the line and we say the 30 biggest ones are called GSIBs, and then all the others are called non-GSIBs. In the European reality, the border between a pure GSIB and the -1 is extremely blurred. In reality, they are competitors. They are on the same markets throughout Europe, or within their country where their headquarters are licensed. And in reality, there are a number of elements which show that we could consider that some of these OSIs, as we say in our jargon, could be assimilated to some extent to GSIBs. So this notion of having a pure Pillar 1 and an additional Pillar 2 for GSIBs and a pure Pillar 2 approach for all the others without any reference to any sort of standard is not so clear to us, and we would have preferred the EBA approach in its report issued at the moment of the issuance of the proposal, which said that, well, finally, for the OSIs, or at a minimum a part of the OSIs, the most systemic ones, it would make sense to have also a Pillar 1 for these OSIs and an additional Pillar 2 as far as necessary. It makes a difference in reality when you go to bankers and then you explain that in one case there is a standard and we add an additional Pillar 2 of 3%, and in another case we start at a Pillar 2 level of, let's say, 19 or 20% directly. It's not the same story in reality, even if at the end of the day the numbers are exactly the same ones after the addition of Pillar 1 and Pillar 2. But there are certainly here questions around this cliff effect approach, and we would have appreciated to avoid it, and we've said it several times. Each time we had a capacity to mention it. So at a minimum, what is important, and this is my second point, is to keep a real flexibility to obtain this avoidance of any cliff effect, and to give the resolution authorities sufficient flexibility and not so many constraints to be able to tailor the MREL requirements to the reality of the banking groups, to the reality of the strategies, to the reality of the tools we want to use. MREL is the end of a story. It's not the beginning. And this is not generally well understood. Generally speaking, when we start a discussion, the first question is, how much? I need to know. Well, it depends. It depends on the strategy. It depends on the tools. It depends on the location. It depends on a number of things. And we understand from the proposal made by the Commission that it's not necessarily well accepted to give a full flexibility to authorities because the legislators would like to, let's say, calibrate this flexibility and to be sure that we address exactly in the same way the same questions. But one thing is to address in the same way the same questions. Another thing is to obtain exactly the same numbers from one group to the other. So, well, as you see, we are at the same time not in favor of a sort of dedicated calibration limited to a very small number of institutions, but we are not in favor of a general calibration of everything for everybody. We would like to find the trade-off, keeping sufficient flexibility and giving us enough freedom to tailor our requests and not to be obliged to spend half of a year in justifying why we do this request instead of improving the resolvability of the banks to which we send this request. And I think we are driven at the SRB by this objective of improving the resolvability of banks today, and not in 10 or 20 years. We would like to make progress from now, and we know that a number of banks have started enormous works to make this progress, which is expected by everybody. But we are not yet there, and for that we need certainly to be able to tailor our requirements. The third idea I would like to convey to you today, it's about the question of transition periods. I really appreciate the proposal made by the Commission, which is, let's say, rather nuanced on that side, just pinpointing the 19 and 22 for the GSIBs, and that's very, very logical because the GSIBs are under the TLAC proposal, so it would be a bit strange to say that for the European GSIBs we have a different approach. So, but let's say, letting sufficient flexibility, the flexibility I expect to the resolution authorities to tailor the transition periods for other banks. And here, it's complementary to what I've said. If we expect to have a sort of, let's say, continuum between GSIBs and the most systemic banks and a bit less systemic ones, etc., to turn this into reality, we need to have adapted transition periods, because the reality of the different banking systems throughout the banking union is different, because the reality of each bank within each banking system is also different. And we are keen to address these differences when discussing and setting our MREL targets year after year, as you know.
Could we, sorry, just one more minute, please?
Yeah. Eligibility criteria will be my fourth point. We understand the proposal of the Commission. We are supportive of these efforts to, let's say, to have more clarity about the criteria of the elements we want to compute within MREL. But we have to address also this transition period, and it's critical to obtain certainly a sort of a grandfathering measure or something like that, not to have peaks and holes in the process of building credible MREL layers for all banks. My other points are dealing with, and I will go very quickly because we support strongly what Andrei mentioned about the creditor hierarchy. This is a way of improving, in reality, the quality of MREL with more subordinated instruments at the moment of a crisis. So we are really supportive of that. We are really supportive also of the intermediate parent undertaking suggested by the EU Commission services. We can come back to that one during the debate. And we would like also to improve the proposal made by the Commission services on the moratorium tool. This is a critical one. Let me say that we've seen recently the value added of having a strong moratorium tool, and this is not the case today in the BRD number 1, and it won't be, in our view, sufficient under the proposal made by the EU Commission services. So we've made suggestion to improve this moratorium tool, and we hope that at the end of the debate they will be introduced in the final legislation, improving the framework for implementing this MREL with a view to improving the resolvability of European banks. Thank you very much.